At the end of the 100 days of the Trump administration, let's just review for a moment the opposition to it. And it's actually, if you think about it, a tripartite, a threefold opposition. Pollsters, the media, and the Democratic Party and the institutionalized left. The pollsters have Donald Trump down four or 5 points, but when you actually look at the Rasmussen poll or Mark Penn's poll, a Democratic centrist, Trump is almost even. And then when you look with greater clarity at the New York Times poll that has him way down, you see that only 37% of the people polled voted for Donald Trump. But Donald Trump won by almost 1.5 points. Don't you think it should have been, 51, 49%? So they were deliberately, in the case of the New York Times, under polling Trump supporters. The same was true with the Washington Post. They polled over 2,000 people, but only 840 were identified as Trump voters. Shouldn't that have been half? So what am I getting at? We're getting right back to what happened in 2016 when the polls were completely wrong. The same thing happened in 2020 when they overestimated Biden's strength by 4 or 5 points. And then even in 2024, the NPR poll had, on the last day of the election, they had Kamala Harris winning by 4 points. The Des Moines Register had Iowa lost to Trump by 3 points. He won it by 12. So what the pollsters are doing, not that Trump hasn't lost some because of the controversy over the trade wars, but the pollsters are trying to create momentum, fundraising, and jazz up opposition. Then we turn to the media. The media is in a fight with the Democratic left now because of the scandal of Joe Biden. The Democratic left is saying, well, you were a journalist. If you thought he was demented or cognitively challenged, why didn't you report it? But the journalists are saying, we couldn't get close to him. He looked okay for us because you had him in such a guarded environment. In truth, they're both guilty. Do you remember those press conferences by Karine Jean-Pierre? Did anyone ever hear one question on those daily or 3 or 4 times a week press conferences? Miss Jean-Pierre, is Joe Biden cognitively able to navigate himself to the podium? What is the nature of his cue cards? Have you had a Montreal cognitive assessment of him? There was nothing. It was a combination of the Democratic Party, the Biden insider, and the media. And here's another point very quickly. The media has gained a lot of influence and power in the opposition because there is no opposition on the Democratic Party. So in lieu of an alternate agenda, the media has taken it upon themselves to use the only strategy that the Democratic Party can come up with, and that is to attack Donald Trump. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at the Democratic Party and the left in general, they have boxed themselves in. On the one hand, they have no institutional power, no ability to pass legislation, losing the House and the Senate, no presidency, White House, no executive orders. Ultimately, all of the cherry-picked district and circuit judges will be overturned by a largely conservative Supreme Court. In lieu of actual power, then you look at what is the alternative. Maybe the alternative is a 1994 Newt Gingrich contract with America, an alternate agenda. Yes, we can do better on the border than you can. Yes, we have a better foreign policy with Iran. There's nothing. There's no shadow government. There's not a young Bill Clinton ascendant. There's no young Barack. There's nobody. There's no leaders. There's no agenda. Nothing. It's nihilism. And so let's look at the third element. Do they have a good old days? Can they say Donald Trump ruined things? They were so good under Biden. The border we liked it open. 12 million, we could have got 20 million illegal aliens. Let's go back to that. We had a wonderful retreat from Afghanistan. Picture perfect. We can do it again. The Iran, the theater war in Ukraine and Iran, that wasn't our fault. Maybe it was inevitable. We had a really good inflation. We had a little hyperinflation of 9%. So there is no alternative good old days. They can't say Donald Trump wrecked something because they had wrecked the country. So what are we left with? we're left with Donald Trump wore a blue suit at the Vatican funeral. Donald Trump is a fascist. No, according to Governor Pritzker, he's a Nazi. No, according to Al Gore, he is a Nazi. No, according to members of the Congress, is he deserving of polite conversation? You have to use the F word, or maybe it's the SHI word. It's smutty mouth, potty mouth videos. What is the one principle that ties them all together? We're going to talk about that in the next video, but it's about fear that Donald Trump's first 100 days are not as chaotic and bad as they tell us, but we might be on the cusp of something that will be very, very successful and will ensure Donald Trump has a successful presidency.
I think the stock market is critical to our economy, but this idea that you go into a complete panic because it goes from 44 to 40, and then every single day, the Wall Street, this is the worst start in January in history. Well, yes, it went up to a record 44,000 after people got elected Trump. So of course it was at an all-time high, had nowhere else to go. And then you know what's going to happen if he cuts these deals and you get all this investment starts to come in and reified, it's going to go crazy, the stock market.
Yeah.
But I don't want to keep hitting the Wall Street Journal, but today, Sunday, as I'm speaking, I never read hard copy, but I was at a hotel speaking and I read the hard copy Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, and it was just you know what I did today, Jack? I looked at the news, the reporters for the Wall Street Journal. I won't mention their names out of deference, but then I hit them and looked at the articles they'd written prior, and then I Googled some of them. I would make the suggestion that they are to the left of the New York Times reporter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The editorial page is libertarian.
Yeah.
It's not conservative, it's libertarian.
It's a schizophrenic enterprise between its news and its...
It is.
What did our friend Peggy Noonan have to say this week? And was she lamenting?
She was talking about the next pope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well,
I have nothing against her. She's a very nice person, but I don't read one word she said. Because I would if it was consistent, but it's one day Donald Trump is elected and we've got to worry about the lost interior of the country, and we've got to be more empathetic, and that's what the election's about. And the next thing it's racism and divisiveness and all that, you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah. I could give a treatise on her, but
that's why I really like this speech from this, and I don't want to give the game away, but he's probably, after Elon Musk, the most famous entrepreneur in the United States. And he gave a lecture that was stunning about why we should be confident, why Doge is necessary, why the type of investment and the magnitude of foreign investment that's coming into the United States in high-tech bioengineering, genetics, cancer research, improved crop species, AI, my gosh. And you know what was the theme of the whole thing?
What?
American nationalism. It reminded me, and he mentioned, I've written all this about, he had a lot of things that I had written about. Not that I don't think he was influenced, but they were parallel. He was talking about the World War II production board, and I mentioned that a lot, William Knudsen, that these people, yeah. They're very strange, especially the younger entrepreneurs. They've been told, go out and make money, and we're not going to regulate you, and we're going to do two things. We're going to protect you from those Europeans, and we're going to make sure China doesn't screw you over. But we only ask one thing in return. Protect your fellow Americans. Make Americans stronger. Make the most sophisticated weapons in the world to deter our enemies. Make sure we win the AI. At one point, the speaker somebody said something. You get the impression that everybody picks on Elon, and he came up. It wasn't a hostile question from the narrator. It was a good question. And you know what he said? How many satellites does China have? How many satellites do the EU have? And how many satellites do the United States government have? And how many satellites does Elon Musk have? 2 to 1. He's got twice all those people put together. When I hear Jasmine Crockett and all those people, or Jamie Raskin or whoever, or Elizabeth Warren, these non-entity mediocrities attack Musk all the time, and you think that if he cut off this, if he didn't give Starlink to Ukraine, they would have lost that war. If he didn't come in and get Starlink with all these hundreds, thousands of satellites and the SpaceX, the NASA brand would be worthless. If he hadn't have gone up there and rescued those people, they probably would have been dead. If he single-handedly created a patent battery that is like no other in the world. I was speaking not too long ago, and a guy had a beautiful Mercedes. And I said, you can probably go 300. No, I can't. I can't go as far as a Tesla. Why can't you? The batteries aren't as... He did all of that. This Tesla that my wife has, it just sits there at the charger, and then the next couple of days, it's like your phone. It's been super, you know what I mean, downloaded, and it's as sophisticated as the new model. My point is that he's done so much for this country. And to hear all these people, I know that he might have a touch of Asperger's like all these geniuses do. That's how they filter out all the noise, I think. Their brains are just fixated on science, physics, math, and they don't have the distractions, so they can be socially awkward. But my God, you compare what he's done for the United States, and then you see these intellectual midgets that get up there and call him all these names. I don't want to make fun of little people.
No, I wouldn't use the word intellectual with them, lack of their. So, by the way, Victor, I was reading Epoch Times or Epoch Times, depending on how you pronounce it, and there was some article about him, and it was talking about, we know he has a company that's a tunneling company.
Yeah, boring company.
Yeah, boring company. And something about boring a tunnel from the U.S. to Europe that would then have pneumatic travel of an hour. And I'm reading, it sounds kind of, Flash Gordon or Space Age or whatever, but I'm thinking, well, I bet this guy could do that. I didn't take it as absolute fantasy. I
remember when Tesla was a little bankrupt company, took it over, and he said something to the effect that all the things that bother you about your car are going to not exist. It's not going to overheat. It's not going to have a radiator. It's not going to have all this oil changes. It's not really going to have brakes. It'll brake on its own. You'll have brakes, but it's not going to be like you have to change brake pads every 20,000 miles. Your tires will go 70,000. It was like, oh yeah, right. And it all came true. And yet, just because he weighed in, they didn't mind when he voted for Hillary, or he said he voted for Biden. People said he voted for Biden. I don't know if he acknowledged that. Everybody was happy with him, and now he endorses Trump after the first assassination attempt. That was the first time he did, and then Doge, and he's spending all this time trying to find. He's never going to get $1 trillion. It's impossible to cut $1 trillion out of a $5-point-something trillion budget in 1 year. But he may get 200 billion. He's at 150. But they hate him, and then they hate everything he's done. But he's done more for us than any other. Edison had genius and invented the light bulb, and then he had this electric company that had a lot of manifestation. Bell invented the phone with help from others, and then he had, what came Bell. Kaiser Steel, he was a brilliant guy. Henry Ford, the assembly line. But I don't think we've ever had anybody who was engineer, scientist, entrepreneur, and then did the whole automobile, and then the whole way we communicate online, and then the space thing, and then social media, and revolutionized all of it. Joe Biden spent $7 billion for the chargers, and there's only like 10 of them. Suddenly, Elon's got charger in Selma, California. There's Tesla. There's a whole bank of Tesla. They're everywhere. Yeah. How did he do that? I don't understand how he did it, but he did it.
Plus, he's repopulating the world himself.
Yeah, you drive in your Tesla and you put, just on your phone, all of a sudden, all the chargers and stations on your way pop up, and you can reserve. It's just incredible. And the idea that nincompoop Jasmine Crockett would say, we're going to take you down. Mm-hmm. With her fake southern inner city patois after she went to prep school, or that Elizabeth Warren would
High cheekbones.
Pocahontas.
Hey, Victor,
Really
I've got to
frustrating.
ask you about the unnamed speaker. Are you allowed to say what the venue was that this person
No,
was speaking?
it had something to do with my job, and
Okay.
it's an annual retreat, and there were a lot of my colleagues speaking, but there was kind of the piece de resistance with the last speaker, and I have followed him, but it was just stunning. It was just stunning to see someone who is second perhaps to Elon, and maybe I don't mean that in a derogatory, but
Right.
I mean he has the same type of Renaissance skills.
Well, let me
And to
ask
see
you
him to
about,
be he was so confident. He was just like what we've been talking about, Jack, that things are going well.
But
And he
did it
just
go over well with the? I assume there were people there who were policy people, and then maybe some
Yes.
philanthropic
Well,
people. Did it go over well with the
yes,
same with both?
yes. Everybody was relieved because you see,
Okay.
I work at an institution where the word tariff ends all conversation because we have renowned economists, and our economists essentially think tariffs are either A, irrelevant. Trade deficits, excuse me. Trade deficits are either irrelevant, or B, there's no real opinion on, they go up and down, or C, they're good. They're good. And for someone to come along like Trump and say they're bad, and especially when you have a huge budget deficit and an even greater problem with the national debt, especially as Jason Furman, as I pointed out, who is Obama's, and I think the brother of Judge Furman, one of the cherry-picked anti-Trump liberal judges, but he wrote an op-ed saying anytime that the trade deficit is greater than 3% of current GDP, you're in big trouble. And he had a long formula. But the point I'm making is we're over that right now. So I would think that a lot of my colleagues would be more worried than they are. But I gave two talks. One was a debate with a historian, a very renowned historian, and the other was just a talk on my own. And I thought I was pretty upbeat. I don't know how that went over, but there were some people there who also gave good talks. I left, I just feel that something's happened in Silicon Valley. I wasn't a big fan of Silicon Valley, but and it's not just that Andreessen or Horowitz or Elon or the rest of them have gravitated over David Sachs, those people, but it's that there's a bunch of young, the Anduril defenses, drones. It seemed, he mentioned drones. It was just, the speaker did, it was just fascinating that basically we're building these $150 million, $200 million fighter aircraft that the human can only accept 9 Gs, when they're turning at that speed, and drones can do like 15 or 16 or even higher Gs. So when you put a drone the size, a fighter drone, and you program it, it's going to destroy the human aircraft every single time.
Right.
And he had some statistics on what, just off the wall. He wasn't trying to be data driven. He just said this is roughly what's the kill ratio of armor and aircraft and drone, and it's drones. So what his point was that we've got to really recalibrate everything, and we're going to do it. It wasn't we've got to do it and we're not doing it. We're going to be able to find in 5 years cancer cells as soon as they appear in your system through this type of new AI technology. We're going to be able to grow certain types of crops that will get nitrogen from the air and not from the soil. And he said even though he was getting on in years, this was the most exciting time to be alive.
Wow.
And then when the questions were directed toward Trump, he was not shy about saying that China came up, and he just said, I would not want to take on China. I know what they can do to people and to companies, but somebody had to do it. And I'm glad I don't have to do it, but I'm glad he did, Trump. Yeah. And Gordon Chang has as I mentioned, he has a good article about I don't know if he's very optimistic. It might be triumphalism. He said that China is folding as we speak. And that we haven't even got into delisting their companies that cheat and give false data on stock exchanges, or the 300,000 students. If you cut off the 300,000 students, or you just said, you know what, for every American in China, you can have a Chinese student in America. That's fair, isn't it? We have 9,000 students in China. You can have 9,000 Chinese students here. They would be cut off from their technology.
Yeah.
In 5 years, they would start falling behind us.
Would kill a number of colleges here that are dependent on their money.
That's
but,
the big
so
shoe
be it.
that's going to drop. And we were also talking about that.
Yeah.
Other people were that, and I wrote an article last week that the universities do not want to get in an argument with the federal government because they're the proverbial picturesque mossy rock on the hillside that looks beautiful, and you turn it over and there's slugs and biters and dead crap in there and fungi, and that's what they have with their racial policies and their Chinese money, gutter and
gutter
China.
money. Yeah.
500 million this year from China, communist China. They don't give anything. Listeners, you know that better than I do. They don't give anything gutter and communist China unless there's a quid pro quo. They're not philanthropic people.
No,
they want a Middle East studies program that hates Israel and indoctrinates stupid, naive, spoiled brat elite students that will be diplomats and politicians and CEOs.
They expect a big return on their investment.
And they get
also.
it. They get it. Look at what's happening.
If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our latest content.